Hello, and welcome to this video supplement for the first post of my knitting tools series, which you can find on my blog at amusingyarns.com. Although the topic for today is yarn unwinders, I made this video to demonstrate how the most common methods of yarn management can add unwanted twist to your yarn, and why a yarn unwinder is my preferred method for managing my yarn while I knit. There are other reasons to love yarn unwinders, aside from the fact that they do not impart twist to your yarn, but the twisting issue is a significant one. First, let's talk about yarn management, which is to say how you get your yarn from the ball and into your knitting. There are two ways that most knitters use. The most obvious one is starting from the outside end and pulling. This, as you know, forces the ball to tumble and roll in whatever direction offers the least amount of resistance. Some people will keep the ball contained in a yarn bowl or other restraining device so that it isn't rolling under the couch or down the aisle of a bus, but either way, the yarn is coming off the ball kind of haphazardly. The second way is to pull the inside end, after you've fished it out and dealt with the yarn barf, of course, but after that, it quite neatly dispenses yarn while the ball remains more or less stationary. I'd say the center pull ball is the preferred method for a lot of knitters, and it was mine too for many years until I understood what was happening to the yarn. Now let's imagine this rolled up measuring tape is a ball of yarn. Whether you're dealing with a ball or cake or cone of yarn, there's an axis around which the yarn is wound, which corresponds to the hole down the center. We'll call this axis the north-south axis, and this measuring tape also has a north-south axis around which the tape is wound. Unlike yarn, the measuring tape is flat and rigid, so we'll be able to clearly see any twists along its length. Right now, it's neatly rolled with the white side facing towards the center with no twists in the tape. By the way, the idea for the measuring tape analogy comes from Tech Knitter, who has a pretty neat blog called Tech Knitting. When I pull yarn from a center pull ball, it's quite difficult to see what's actually happening. But if this is my ball of yarn and I take the inside end and pull up as I would when knitting, you can see there's twist being added to the tape. Each time a full circle comes out of the roll, a full twist is imparted to the tape. You can imagine that over the entire length of the ball, quite a few twists get added, and whether you pull at the north end or the south end, you will get twists. Although it is worth noting that whatever twist you add in the northwards direction, you'll get the opposite twist in the southwards direction. Incidentally, if you pull the outside end, you'll get the twisting effect in the opposite direction, but twist nonetheless. This applies to cones as well. If you're pulling yarn off the top of a cone, which seems like a nice tidy way to manage the yarn, you're also imparting twist every time a full circle or circumference of yarn leaves the cone. This is why I love yarn unwinders. What the yarn unwinder does is it unreels your yarn, and therefore it's not adding any twist. A retractable measuring tape works in the same way, and it's why we love them so much. Aside from being quick to wind, it doesn't get twisted up when you need to extend or retract the tape. There's a rotating axle inside that keeps the tape oriented in one direction and prevents it from twisting up. When you use a yarn unwinder, it rotates the yarn on its north-south axis, and by letting the yarn unwinder unreel the yarn, you're not imparting any twist to it, so long as you don't pull the yarn off the top, like so. You might be thinking, sure, twist is being added to the yarn when you pull from the center or off the top, but clearly many people have successfully knit countless items without a yarn unwinder. This is true. A measuring tape is unusable in this state, but yarn is definitely more forgiving, so oftentimes the twisting action doesn't add up to any noticeable difference, except when it does. When is it noticeable? Well, an unbalanced yarn will coil up on itself, whether it has become over-twisted or untwisted. I'm adding twist to this yarn, and you can see how it's starting to kink. At the very least, it can be awkward to work with, but kinked up yarn can get to a point where it won't even pass smoothly over your tensioning fingers. And if you've been untwisting the yarn, It can cause the plies to start splitting apart, which can lead to more frustration while you knit. The worst case is when added twist causes your knitted fabric to bias. Biasing is when the columns of stitches are leaning to one side rather than running straight up and down. Sometimes we intentionally knit on the bias with the use of paired decreases and increases, but when unintentional biasing occurs in regular knitting, it can be pretty disappointing. In my experience, a biasing fabric can't really be fixed with blocking. It will want to return to its original state even if you can kind of force it into shape temporarily. I should mention that a yarn unwinder will not solve all potential biasing problems. There are other factors to consider, but added twist is one potential problem we can eliminate by using a yarn unwinder. If you'd like to learn more about yarn unwinders, you can check out my blog post, which goes into a bit of detail about using and choosing them. If you have any questions that I haven't answered here or on the blog, feel free to send me a message and I'll do my best to give you an honest answer. Thanks for watching.